You are amazing. And I love you all. And I love the work that you're doing. I've been talking with people for the last few days and being reinvigorated and inspired by all the wonderful things you're doing, both here in Portland, in Seattle, across the country, and from overseas. And all the things you're doing, from community gardens to prison visitation programs to DIY upcycling, all of these things are excitingly contributing to a new economics that exists beyond capitalism. It's a not-for-profit economy that's emerging. And to begin with, I'd like you to pause for 15 seconds and see what are the images or the words that come up for you when I say the words not-for-profit or non-profit. Take 15 seconds to feel what those words are. And now I'd encourage you to spend just 20 seconds or 30 seconds turning to the person next to you and sharing what came up for you in relation to those words. And then I'll be sourcing some of those to begin with. Just 15 more seconds. Okay, that was a quick, short exercise, and I realize that's probably going to have sparked a whole lot of things. How am I going to get everyone's attention back at this point? Yes, if everyone starts clapping, that'd be great. Okay. So could I grab from the audience a few of the words that came up in relation to non-profit or not-for-profit? Sorry? Difficult. Struggling. Passion. Unselfish. Values-based mission. Relationships. Corporate funded. Resilient. Okay, just one more. Greater good. Foundations. Thank you so much. This is great because I grew up in the 1980s, and all the words you've just mentioned were the words that I associated with not-for-profit organizations. They were charity-dependent organizations. They were based largely on volunteer efforts and support. And the exciting thing is that over the last 20 and 30 years, what we understand as not-for-profit has totally changed. In the latest study that was done across 27 different nations, including the US, Canada, UK, and Australia, 43% of not-for-profit organizations' revenue is now self-generated. Why has this happened? Well, of course, the boom and bust cycle built into capitalism meant that not-for-profit managers found that when there was a bust, all of their funding dropped out. So they started to look to resilient measures to respond to that. And they built business models in under their organizations. And here I'm talking not just about 501c3 non-profit organizations. I'm talking about community land trusts, consumer cooperatives, co-housing, all sorts of things that exist in a model that is not for profit in the sense that any profit that is made in the business activity associated with the entity is put back in to the organization, is refunneled in a generative process rather than the extractive process that sits underneath the for-profit capitalistic system. Now, many people have put forward some alternatives for what we need to do in relation to the two main crises that we face. Massive financial inequity, where 75 people own and control more than half of the world's wealth, and the climate crises that we're familiar with. And the standard responses go like this. We open up the market and make it a more free market, and we know what historically that does for inequity. It defies physics in the way that the money just trickles upwards. And at the other end of the spectrum, when we have state-centred or planned approaches or heavy market regulation, there are some important deficits that exist within that model because, as we've seen in the past in the Cold War, when power is centralised, it generally doesn't work very well for any individual within the wider community. And it actually has a stifling effect when you look at innovation, both in terms of social and technological, when we are heavy-handed in this space. So these two approaches, both of them at different ends of the spectrum, still engage with a notion that we can have for-profit business, that we can privatise wealth through our business systems. The fundamental problem with the privatisation of wealth, and with people not saying, here's an economics of enough where I can cap my income based on my wage, is that it has a centralising tendency. Any for-profit system will always see, over time, a rising wealth inequality. And that's essentially a message that sits underneath Thomas Piketty's latest work as much as anything. The message I'm here to share with you in these last few minutes is that a very exciting alternative has been emerging, where we actually, if you look at business competitiveness over time, and you compare, for example, a joint stock corporation that is not interested in environmental issues compared to one that is, versus a state-owned enterprise, versus a worker cooperative, a consumer cooperative, a not-for-profit enterprise. If you look at the spectrum of business entities, legal models of the firm, what the data is showing is that not-for-profit organisations are increasingly outcompeting the equivalent for-profit organisations, and worker co-ops are outcompeting the ones further to the right on that spectrum as well. Green businesses that are corporations are outcompeting the non-green ones. In other words, there is an arc of the economic universe that actually bends towards equality. We actually are seeing a shift in competitiveness where capitalism brings itself to its own end by allowing a competitive marketplace in which not-for-profit business actually outcompetes for-profit business. Now, I'd love to talk with people about this, about the work we've done over the last 5 years that will be coming out in our book, How on Earth, Flourishing in a Not-for-Profit World by 2050, and to go into all the details about taxation, inflation, debt, fractional reserve banking, all the things that we looked at, that every turn we made, we realised that the more businesses that are not-for-profit, such as every credit union in the US, for example, which is a not-for-profit financial institution, the more it shifts in that direction, the more we actually start to see a world that goes beyond capitalism. And it actually works. We've modelled it in terms of how it works, in terms of redistribution. It functions, it's effective. We engage with all of the challenges that exist in the non-profit model and talk about things like the NFL not-for-profit organisation CEO salary of $39 million, and we engage with those things, and there's a way that actually works out beyond that. So to end, I'd like to just share a little story that you may be familiar with about Joseph Heller, author of Catch-22. He was at a party out on off the east coast of the US, and it was for an investment banker of his putting on a big party. And his friend Kurt came up to him and said, "Joseph, you must be really depressed here at this event because this guy earns more in a day than you'll earn in the whole course of your book sales throughout your lifetime." And Joseph said to him, "Doesn't bother me." And Kurt said, "Why is that?" And Joseph said, "Because I've got something that he'll never have. Enough."